You should transfer your villa to us, my in-laws demanded. But what I did after was not even in their wildest dreams. I, Alex, 35M, stood on the second-floor balcony of my villa, gazing out over the rolling landscape that stretched beyond the property. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of amber and violet. From this vantage point, everything seemed perfect: the picturesque view, the meticulously maintained garden, and the elegant stone facade of my dream home. But I knew better. Behind this flawless exterior was a festering rot, the slow, insidious destruction of everything I had built. I took a slow sip from the glass of whiskey in my hand, the burn in my throat doing little to soothe the storm brewing inside me. My knuckles were white around the glass, my grip tightening as I thought about the events that led me here. When Claire, my wife, and I bought this villa, it was supposed to be our sanctuary. We spent years working tirelessly, saving every penny. I took on extra contracts at my firm, clocking in 80-hour weeks, while Claire made sacrifices, putting her career on hold to help manage the renovations. It was supposed to be our reward, the symbol of everything we had endured together, but it wasn't ours anymore. No, because now, I shared it with her parents. It started innocently enough, or so it seemed. Claire's parents, George and Martha, were frequent visitors. When we first bought the villa, they would come for weekend stays, lounging by the pool or helping with minor renovations. Claire loved having them around, and at first, I didn't mind it either, but the visits grew longer and more intrusive. One weekend became 2 weeks, 2 weeks became a month, and before I knew it, they were living with us permanently. At first, I tolerated it, thinking it was temporary. But they made no plans to leave. They commandeered the guest room, then took over the entertainment lounge as their personal TV room. Martha redecorated the kitchen without asking me, replacing the modern appliances I had chosen with clunky, outdated ones she claimed were more functional. George hired his own landscaper without consulting me. When I asked what the hell was going on, he waved me off with a condescending smile. "You're too young to understand property management, Alex," he said, clapping me on the back like I was some clueless teenager. "Let us handle it. We've been doing this longer than you've been alive." Claire, standing beside him, nodded along. "They know what they're doing, honey," she said sweetly, siding with them as always. I was dumbfounded. After that day, everything began to spiral. George and Martha weren't just living with us, they were asserting their dominance over the property. I came home from work one day to find the study had been emptied. My leather recliner, my desk, and my custom-built bookcases, all gone. In their place, a needlepoint hobby corner for Martha. I confronted Claire, my voice tight with anger. "What the hell is this? Where's my study?" Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "Mom needs a space for her crafts, Alex," she said in that patronizing voice she reserved just for me. "You can use the guest room." The guest room, the one George was using as his office. But Claire's betrayal didn't stop there. Over the next few months, she sided with them at every turn. When George tore down the wine cellar I had custom built to make space for a game room, Claire defended him. When Martha threw away my expensive chef's knives because she didn't like the look of them, Claire shrugged it off. When I asked for privacy in my own bedroom, Claire allowed her mother to waltz in uninvited whenever she pleased. I felt like a guest in my own home, the once beautiful villa, the place I had envisioned spending the rest of my life, had been transformed into a family commune, and I was being slowly pushed into the background, reduced to a prop in my own marriage. It was a Sunday morning when everything finally snapped. I was having coffee by the pool, trying to carve out some solitude, when George sat down beside me. His arrogant grin made my stomach turn. He took a sip of his coffee, then casually dropped the bomb. "You know, Alex," he began, his voice oozing false kindness, "Claire and I were talking about the estate." I clenched my jaw, already bracing myself for whatever idiotic suggestion was coming next. "We think you should transfer the property to us," he said smoothly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Just on paper, of course. For management purposes. We have more experience with large estates, you see." I froze. I stared at him, unable to believe what I had just heard. "Excuse me?" I asked sharply. Martha appeared beside him, nodding enthusiastically. "Oh yes, dear," she cooed. "You and Claire are still so young. You've never managed a property like this. It's for your own good." And then, Claire spoke. She walked over with her coffee, planted herself beside her parents, and smiled sweetly at me. "It makes sense, Alex," she said softly, her voice almost patronizing. "They know how to handle it better. It'll just be easier this way." That was it. The last straw. I set my cup down slowly, stood up, and walked away without a word. I knew if I stayed, I'd lose my temper and do something I'd regret. But as I stormed into the house, something snapped inside me. I was done. I had given them my home. I had given them my marriage. But they were not going to take away my dignity. No. I was going to make them pay. For the next few weeks, I played the perfect husband and son-in-law. I smiled at Martha's insufferable cooking suggestions. I nodded along as George gave me unsolicited financial advice. I even agreed with Claire's ridiculous ideas for redecorating the master suite. But beneath the surface, I was planning their downfall. I made sure that the entire villa and all its assets were solely in my name. Claire's name? Nowhere on the deed. Her parents? Legally irrelevant. Next, I liquidated all the joint accounts Claire and I had opened. I transferred every penny into my personal accounts. She would never see it coming. And finally, I hired a private investigator. Because if I was going to burn it all down, I wanted to be thorough. The night of their downfall was nothing short of poetic justice. I had spent weeks meticulously planning it, crafting every detail to perfection. I wanted the public humiliation to be as cutting as possible, to strip them bare in front of their friends and peers. The very people they loved to impress. I started by inviting everyone they admired, Claire's friends, her parents' social circle, and my own colleagues. I made sure the guest list was extensive, at least 50 people. I wanted witnesses. The villa was bathed in golden light, the chandeliers glowing like stars, illuminating the lavishly decorated rooms. I had the catering staff bring in the finest wine, extravagant hors d'oeuvres, and an elegant dinner spread. Everything was perfect, on the surface. Claire was dressed to kill, wearing a flowing black silk gown, her dark hair cascading in waves. She walked around with her signature smugness, laughing with her friends and smiling sweetly at her parents. Her mother, Martha, was the image of self-importance. She clutched her wine glass delicately, her fingers adorned with expensive rings, probably bought with my money. George, ever the self-assured braggart, held court near the pool, boasting about the villa and its future renovations as if he owned it, but tonight, everything was about to change. When the evening was at its peak, I clinked my wine glass. The sharp sound rang out, cutting through the murmur of conversation. Everyone turned to me. I stood by the ornate marble fireplace, looking out over the sea of expectant faces. Claire smiled sweetly, clearly assuming I was about to make some sappy toast about our wonderful life together. She had no idea. I cleared my throat and smiled, my voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, feigning warmth. I wanted to take a moment to share some exciting news. Claire's eyes sparkled with pride, assuming I was about to publicly praise her and her family. I turned toward her and smiled, coldly. "As of tonight, this villa is officially and permanently mine." The room fell silent. I could see the confusion flashing across everyone's faces. Claire's smile faltered slightly, and she let out a confused chuckle, thinking I was making some sort of joke. "What?" she asked lightly, her voice wavering slightly. I pulled the legal documents from my jacket pocket. I turned toward the crowd, holding them up like a winning hand in poker. "The deed. The legal proof of ownership," I announced, my voice laced with finality. "This villa, my villa, was never shared with Claire. It's in my name only." I watched as her face fell, the color draining from her cheeks. Her wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Her eyes widened with dawning horror. What? No. No, no. That's not possible. She stammered, her voice rising with panic. Martha, now completely pale, clutched George's arm. You're lying. Alex. She spat, her voice venomous with disbelief. I turned toward her slowly, relishing the moment. Oh, I'm not. My voice was calm and lethal, carrying an unmistakable satisfaction. I walked over to the long dining table and placed the stack of official legal documents right in the center. Here are the deeds, the financial records, and the updated contracts. I looked directly at Claire, my gaze unflinching. You're not on any of them. Neither are your parents. Claire's breath hitched, her hands trembled as she snatched the papers off the table and scanned through them. Her eyes desperately searching for her name. But it wasn't there. It had never been there. Her voice came out as a choked whisper. You tricked me. I smiled faintly. No, Claire. I outplayed you. For a moment, there was only silence. The room was frozen, with all eyes on Claire and her parents. The once proud socialites now stood exposed, their deception laid bare for all to see. George's face was livid, his cheeks flushed red with fury. You ungrateful bastard. He snarled, stepping toward me. His fists clenched, his voice filled with venom. But I didn't flinch. I calmly held up a restraining order I had filed against him days earlier, anticipating his outburst. Take one more step toward me, George, I said softly, and I'll have you arrested on the spot. His eyes widened with disbelief, and he stumbled back, realization finally dawning on him. Martha clutched her pearls, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. You conniving, ungrateful. She spat, but her voice cracked. Her friends and acquaintances were watching with wide eyes, some whispering, others shaking their heads in disapproval. And Claire, my dear wife, stood in the center of it all, humiliated and broken, her false mask shattered. Her voice wavered with desperation as she reached for me. Alex, please, she whimpered, her voice cracking with emotion. I met her gaze, my eyes cold and unyielding. You betrayed me, Claire. Now you'll face the consequences. And then, with all the grace and composure I could muster, I turned my back on her and walked away. The next morning, I stood by the balcony, coffee in hand, as I watched the moving vans pull up. Claire's parents were escorted out by security, their belongings stuffed into cheap cardboard boxes. George screamed bloody murder, cursing and threatening me with empty legal threats. Martha wailed, grasping at her pearls like a woman on the brink of collapse, but I felt nothing. They were nothing more than strangers now. Claire, however, was different. She stood at the foot of the stairs, watching in silence as the movers carted away her things. Her eyes were hollow, her face pale and drawn. She no longer wore that condescending smirk. No more arrogance. No more superiority. Only defeat. She looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, Alex. I'm sorry. Let's fix this. I stared at her, unmoved by her plea. I took a slow, deliberate sip of coffee before meeting her eyes. You should have thought of that before you chose them over me. And with one final, detached glance, I turned and walked away. That night, I stood alone in the villa, surrounded by the silence I had longed for. No more George's arrogant barking. No more Martha's sneering superiority. No more Claire's betrayal. Just me, my villa, and my freedom. I walked through the empty halls, letting my fingers trail along the cool marble walls, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. As I stood on the balcony, gazing over the beautiful estate, I finally smiled. It was mine again. Every stone. Every corner. Every inch. And they were gone forever.